Today I'm going to try to get as far as I can, as quickly as I can, in the OPXY manual. I tried so hard to to make the camera capture the screen without having to use my phone as a camera, because then I can't show the stuff that's flashing on the screen, which is the mandala I've been developing, this audio visualizer on Java. But I have a close-up view that's pretty decent for covering a lot of the gist of it. The screen's quite small even for, being in person, so getting to see all four of those numbers and representing all four of these encoders was important, and it took a long time, so I have to stream to justify it. Photosensitivity warning, I'm running a audio visualizer patch, and it's currently being controlled by the MIDI on the OPXY, so that's cool. Right now you can see there's something called fade, and it's oscillating up and down, and that's just what I've set the MIDI to do in the OPXY MIDI settings, but I can quickly change that to impact a different variable, like for example a randomizing trigger. So this should randomize the entire patch so often. It's responding to, I can't remember, yeah, it's responding to my voice and the audio, by the way, so, and when I speak, it's, randomly changing all the variables in the lower left-hand corner. But I won't have it on screen, trying to distract from the lovely index of the OPXY, which, for those that don't know, this is a portable sequencer made by Teenage Engineering. It's very powerful. It does a lot of stuff. And I just got through the guide myself. And so something I like to do, especially with a lot of Teenage Engineering stuff, is get through the guide as comprehensively as possible, and then hopefully not have to look at it again, because some of the workflow can be very obtuse, especially with the other piece of Teenage Engineering hardware I have up here with me, which is hopefully my voice isn't too loud. I just want to make sure I'm over the beat when I need to be. The other piece of hardware I have here is the KO2, or the EP133. Anyway, I call it a KO2. It's a step sequencer synth sampler. They work pretty well together, so I have them set up so that the XY is clocking to the KO2. The KO2 is it's controlling the XY. So if I want to play them both in sequence, I can. And if I want to change the tempo, I can. So, perhaps for security's sake, and for demonstration, I guess I'll start with something new. I won't use any of the patterns or songs or anything I have previously done on the OPXY in the time that I've been playing with it, but just to show what is here before moving on. There is a lot already in this session, or this song. and there's a lot of different patterns I've set up. So, for example, here's a different one. It's kind of how the beginning of a song starts, and then there's some variations along the way. But a lot of it I did before really going through the guide, so I think it'd be more fun to try to do something brand new. So, or maybe not, because I feel like that might have changed settings. What did that do? Let me see if I can just go back, because maybe we should use the other one. The thing about the XY is that it's very capable of being integrated into a wide variety of workflows, and I chose a really crazy one to make sure I could stream and show everything I wanted to show at the same time. So bear with me, I'm gonna load the see if this fixes it. It should. I feel like I've done this before. And you're getting it. See, okay, yeah. So, something about the I/O of the OPXY changed when I changed the actual song. So, Company Car is this song project that I've got here, and something worth noting is that when you open a project, sometimes there are some things that aren't activated that you might think should be. For example, the KO2, you can hear it now, but if I turn this off and then turn it back on, I have to turn on the aux input, which is channel 5 on the aux tracks, which we'll hopefully get there to what that all means here in a minute. But let's start by looking at the guide a little bit. It's just to give you an idea. Here's the index. So I don't necessarily think, unless I'm speed running this guide, I don't think I'm going to get through the whole thing in one sitting, but we'll try. I will try to demonstrate some of the stuff as I go along, but I'm really just trying to, like I said, I like going through these guides. Like, for example, for the OPZ, I didn't want to have to use a screen ever when I was using it, so I kind of studied the guide until I felt very comfortable using about 85% of the functionality. But even with the KO2, I still feel like I need a refresher. So this is kind of me doing refreshers. So I'm probably gonna do a little bit of the XY today, and then maybe later this week some KO2 refresher, and then I might try to clock the OPZ with the OPXY, or all three of them, and see what happens. I guess it's just teenage engineering week. But let's get into the nitty-gritty. So it's a very good feeling piece of hardware as far as like weight and most of the tactileness. The keys are pretty decent. The encoders feel good, but there's also some quirks here and there. But it has this grayscale schematic where there's a dark gray, a darkish gray, and then a lighter gray, and then like a white. So it can be a little bit confusing to understand exactly what they mean, but once you get kind of the hang of what's expected, it makes a lot of sense in most of the circumstances. Like, I know when to turn the white encoder a lot better than I used to. Okay, so they go from black to white. The display is nice looking as well. The Velcro rings on the bottom, I haven't attached it to anything, but I there are these 2 circles that have Velcro, and there's another piece that they give you, and then you can slap that on something and have it be there. So powering it up is this tiny little button on the side, right, like on that side, and that is that works fine. I can understand how it might get in the way for some people in certain circumstances, or accidentally get toggled. It turns on fast, and I've only had it crash on me 3 times, and most of it's usually because I'm trying to, I think, run MIDI and I'm clocking both to a KO2 and my laptop that does the visual effects with the OPXY. So I think it might be every once in a while getting its wires crossed, and if it crashes, I can turn it off and turn it right back on, and it's ready to go really fast. The battery's very good too. As far as how I've used it so far, it seems to be pretty good. I'm not often powering other units like with it, but I have for a while and was impressed by it like only being at 60% after so long. So there's an internal microphone. There's a meter on one of the sides of it. So if I start playing, you can see the white meter over here. And the built-in microphone is right right next to the sample button, which is conveniently placed right next to the microphone. I haven't used the built-in microphone very much, but I've used the one for the KO2, and I'm assuming they're very similar, and the KO2 built-in mic is pretty good. There's a pitch bend down on the bottom of the unit, so it's this pitch bend there on the bottom left side. So far, it functions pretty similarly to the OPZ. I haven't quite, gotten around to using it or integrating it that much in my workflow yet. Inputs and outputs. Okay, so this thing is kind of a beast when it comes to this stuff, which is to say that I'm kind of excited to try a couple different variations, throughout this week or whenever. The main thing that you're always plugging into is with USB-C that powers it, but it also has these 4 1/8-inch audio jacks inputs. So one of them's the audio out, and that's what is eventually getting to my stream. And then if you look, and you can't really see with this angle, maybe I have another one. So if you look on this side, I do have 2 more. So I have 3 inputs plugged in. Might be hard to see, but I have the audio output, as well as there's 2 other 1/8-inch, and then the USB-C. So the 2 other 1/8-inch ones that I have plugged in are the MIDI in, which is coming from the KO2. So that's how it clocks. So that's why it knows it should be 72 BPM, because it's at 70. Because see how it's oscillating between 1 and 2. I don't know if that's just natural to the way I'm clocking it, or if I'm actually. Can't I check? In any case, the clocking, the tempo sequencing is pretty easy. Even though it's oscillating, it sounds good. There is sort of a syncopation that I have to work with this arrangement, and I don't know if that's because of the KO2, but I'll find out eventually. And hopefully I'll show you what that kind of syncopation is and how it happens, because the first time I turned this thing on, all that stuff was activated, and I was like, whoa. So just to give you a first 15 minutes impression, when I had my first 15 minutes with this thing, just pressing anything that kind of popped up, I eventually came up with, something I really liked. That said, I have a lot of experience with teenage engineering gear, especially the OPZ. So it wasn't super hard to navigate. But anyway, back to these jacks. They do a lot. So you have the MIDI clocking in going on currently in my setup, and there's also an audio in, which is coming from the KO2 as well. So the KO2 is just going audio in, MIDI in, and then audio out's going to my stream. There's an internal speaker, volume knob, pretty standard stuff. And then also so the multi-out jack is the most verbose one. It has a lot of capabilities. You switch between 6 different output options, like it says. And so you have to go to the screen by pressing the COM button, and then it's this is MIDI here. But if I have nothing plugged into that slot, the multi-out, I can change it between MIDI, CV, gate, sync 8, 16, 624, and it can also be an aux audio output as well, which is cool. So you can have 2 different mixes. Okay, so technical specifications, won't go too far into that, but it is worth noting. I haven't used the Bluetooth much, but I tried. I just don't think I've connected it. I'm going to try seeing if it'll connect to the OPZ, because that has Bluetooth as well, but I haven't tried yet. But I haven't Bluetoothed to any computers, but I haven't really been focusing on it too much. Also, it does have 8 gigabytes of storage. So, let's see. That's pretty nitty-gritty about the electronics and how those are set up. And it can go in and out of a lot of different things. That's when I say it can go into a lot of different workflows. It works with CV. It works with old drum machines. It works with brand new computers. I can press just one button and go into MTP mode to do like a large file transfer. It has 8 gigabytes worth of memory. So it's got a lot. This is probably the most important screen on this guide, and I don't think I've seen it until now. But first off, it's interactive, which is nice. But yeah, main modes are here. So let's see if I can get good at making sure what needs to be seen can be seen. The main modes are these 4 guys right here, and the first one is the first 8 tracks of these over here. That's very similar to the OPZ, especially when you have another 8 tracks, and how they're kind of separated as far as functionality and by UI and by design. Specifically, like one difference for those who are familiar with the OPZ would be that, after your first 8 tracks on the OPZ, it usually goes, kick, snare, percussion, sample percussion, bass, lead, arpeggio, and then chord, I think, is the order of the 8 on the OPZ. And then in the second batch of 8 tracks, it starts with the effects 1, effects 2, and onto the tape loop, the punch-in effects, and like DMX and all the other stuff it does. But as far as the XY goes, they kind of break it up into these 2 buttons as the banks for the 8 tracks. So right now it's on track 1, and it plays percussion. Track 2 does as well. It's mostly percussion or sample-based stuff. And then usually bass is on 3. CV, or just this is just a synth engine that you can run, as well as this. And then this one too, but it's also showing you these icons that might be a little bit confusing because they might reference, actually most of the time they reference the aux 8 channels. So the main modes are the primary 8 tracks, the synth engines and percussion and samples, and then the aux 8 tracks, which is what these icons represent. And we'll get to that when we get there. The third button in this main mode set of 4 is your pattern, or which scene you're currently playing. So here's scene 19. And then this would be scene 1. So you chain the scenes together to create songs. So that's what this button does. And this is the where you sequence each scene by number by pressing Shift and then the third button here, right here. This is the mix view, so you don't see much here, but if we went into more stuff's going on in this scene, so you can see a little bit of volume on the it might be hard to see, but with the grayscale you can see some things are going up in volume. It's just like kind of like a standard mixer. Okay, and those are the 4 main modes. So area 2 is the modules. The modules are basically, it's like your 4 separate screens for everything that you access. So if I'm currently looking at a bank of samples, percussion, I'm on 1 right now, or M1 they refer to it in the guide. So if I go to M2, it's the envelope filter. So if I wanted to chop off the beginning of something, I can. Or I guess this isn't the envelope filter. Yeah, it is. And it has 2 modes. One is sorry, why doesn't it show it? Usually it's amp and filter, but on some tracks it's filter and then like the region of the sample. So that's 2 on the modes, or modules they call it, I guess, which is confusing. So 3, you can turn on essentially what is like a filter of your choosing, like you can do a high pass filter, a low pass filter, banding, some other cool things that you can do. I haven't done a whole lot in this mode, but I do find that if I'm struggling to get a sound to sound the way I want it to, that this will do something interesting usually if I try. So let me go. So now I'm on the bass track, and then if I wanted to, actually, before going further, I'm gonna duplicate, so if I screw anything up I don't lose it. That was pretty easy to get to. You have to go into, you press Shift and the file button, this pen, and then it gives you everything that you have and some of the stuff that's already on there, and you can duplicate from the screen. Usually there's something on the bottom of the screen that 1 through 4 will represent, and then you can access and execute. So now I'm in a new version of this song, or project. Project is the correct term. And now if I change something and I don't want it to stay, I don't have to deal with it. But what I just did was turn off the changing of the visualizer and all the settings in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, because I figured that's probably annoying right now. So sorry. All right, back to these 4 screens. So each track has usually 4 options on modules that you can do stuff with. And if I do stuff with this one, it's essentially filter and EQ. You can also do some interesting stuff with some of the settings. You can see this arrow on the bottom. There's just some unique ways of filtering things out and sending, certain parts of the signal to other places, which is kind of why this thing, it's kind of its whole appeal, is that it wants you to take something and then remap it in a new and unique way in an instant if you want to. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The 4th button is usually this scene or module is a way of modulating your signal, whether you want to use the tempo of the song or an LFO. You can change the amount it modulates, and as well as, just different styles of modulation. It's pretty similar to the OPZ, but it seems like a little bit more streamlined. It was always the hardest thing to commit myself to on the OPZ, because I couldn't see an LFO very easily on a screen, whereas you can with this. So we got through the modules, and I already kind of covered the tracks, which is the 3rd thing in this index, this part of the index. So the tracks, if we go into it, let's see what it says. 1 through 8, let you edit the 8 instrument tracks and 8 auxiliary tracks. Those are those 2 separate banks. So pressing, one of them highlights it, and you can tell. And then whenever you're in aux mode, it's red instead of white. Not here, but up here. Sorry, not here, but up here. So this shows a bass pattern being played. But if I go into this mode, the aux mode, you can see it's red up here. If I add stuff here, it's not going to be red. It will be red if we're recording. It'll show red up here when you interact with it. But this is the step sequencer, and it's currently in MIDI mode because we're on a red color, and track 3 is MIDI. So I'm adding essentially like notes to the MIDI in the step sequencer, but I'm not going to hold on to them because I don't want to actually add notes there. But you can do sequencing with the 8 aux tracks is what I'm trying to say. So just to go over the modules, they do call them modules one more time. In the guide, this is how they refer to them, M1 through M4. The sequencer also, if you can't see very well on the screen, it does have, it's a gradient, much like the encoders. It's aesthetically, it's okay. I always think that their stuff's cute or, interesting looking, but it's more about what this thing can do, which is a lot. Also, I looked at the kind of like the similar, I can't remember the name of it, but Yamaha's come out with a similar kind of multi-track sequencer synth thing that has a lot of functions, and it's you know, not on par with the XY, but it's definitely got a lot of stuff packed into a small size. So just because this thing's kind of small, don't think that it can't do a lot. If you're familiar with the OP1 or the OPZ, consider this kind of like both of those and a little bit more put into one package. So transport, that's pretty familiar to everybody, but just in case you don't know, it's these 6. We have record, play, stop. This changes octaves, so you can see I'm -3 octaves on the bass. And if I go down, pretty self-explanatory. Shift always does a lot of stuff in teenage engineering world. There's usually always going to be a shift button, and it's pretty intuitive what the shift button does, but sometimes it isn't. There is a lot of holding shift and then doing something. So, for example, if I want to do almost anything on the KO2 that's, you know, like on the bottom end of all these buttons, like if I want to do any of the system settings, output, volume, if I want to, you know, do a lot of the more granular stuff, it's all there. It makes sense in most contexts on most of their gear, but you know, it doesn't always. It's not always the most obvious thing. Sometimes you can see it on certain screens like this, and then on others, you don't see anything. Also, it's speaking of you don't see anything, something that might be hard to see is that the these buttons are dimming and getting lighter when they dim when I press the shift button, and they light up again when I let go. That's something that's a step component, or it's showing if there's something called step components, which we're not there yet, but I'll explain those when we get there. So all the regular, you know, the whole gang's here with the transport, very much standard. And something interesting about the keyboard is that there is this interesting, I'm gonna fix this filter. Actually, just to show it, if I want, let's say I wanted to just have a new, I wanted a new sound here instead. You hold Shift and you press the track you're on, and you can audition them all. So let's go Shark Attack, and notice that the kind of the animation's different than the one that was there before. So each track, or when you select something, one of the synth engines, you're going to see if it's different. That's not a good example. Apologize. Let's go with organ. So now you can see a different basic menu screen for interacting with it. So going back to bass. I don't like that bass. This one's kind of cute. It's a hairdryer. Alright, I was on... Is it Shark Attack? Yeah, alright. That's fine. Shark Attack's fine for now. Now, so we're going to talk about the keyboard. Yeah, so this is not what you'd expect. You can see that this looks like a normal keyboard in its layout. far as playing keys, these would be the black keys and these would be the white keys on the piano. But it starts down here at F instead of C. That throws me off a little bit. Sometimes I think I'm hitting shift, but I'm actually hitting the low F. But, you know, so far it hasn't really tripped me up too much or anything. All right, so the sample button is, so we covered the keyboard, but the sample button is in the upper right-hand corner. And if I press it, what ends up happening is it goes immediately into a mode where it's trying to sample. And it was, I think, doing the internal mic, but you can cycle through what your sample source is and set a threshold and do all this stuff so that you get the sample the way you want to get it. You just have to figure out what the icons mean. So that's, you know, a very powerful and easy thing to do on this device. And anything you sample, it saves in a specific way that allows you to access it and plug those samples into these engines here. So projects is the pen button. Already talked about that, at least on the surface level. Okay, so the tempo is the metronome looking button, because it is a metronome. And on that screen, I might as well just go through it. You can see that it's clocking to the KO2. If I want that to stop, I can turn that off, actually. So now it's not clocking. I don't know if it's going the other way. I doubt it is, but sometimes this thing's a little bit funky with the way it handles MIDI. But you see the oscillation between 71 and 72 is off, but let's turn it back on because I like it. The other things on the screen are just if you hear the metronome or not. And then I'm actually not sure what this one does, the bottom right here. Maybe we'll get to it in the index someday. But I'll try to figure it out. But the other thing is there's kind of a syncopation here that you can set, and also there's types of swing and shuffle. Right now it's set to shuffle, but there's a bunch of different types. It's very hard to see. I apologize for how much I'm going to be saying that, but you can see the two letters change when I turn this encoder, and SH stands for shuffle. There are a bunch of different types though, and I haven't tried them yet. So volume here, you can see there's a little tiny dot that actually lets you kind of know your orientation relative to where the pot is. So it, you know, it feels fine, works great. And the encoders feel pretty similar, but they have a clicky feeling when you're going up and down. This is smooth. The encoders have this clickiness to them, and this is a smooth, it feels smooth when you turn it. All right. So these are the conventions of the guide, which it's how you interact with this thing. So I said the shift button is always kind of important on teenage engineering stuff, and that's still true. So you might have to hold a button, press some combinations, learn when you have to click an encoder versus rotate. All those things are kind of the proving grounds with teenage engineering stuff. You kind of have to bite the bullet and learn a lot of those things. They aren't always completely obvious, but part of that's kind of the fun with some of their equipment too. So so now it's going to tell us how to get our first project started. So I kind of went through that with just the duplicating with the pen button. But the menu system, whenever the screen's showing you something, it usually makes a lot of sense and has these obvious indicators on the bottom of the screen when there's something that's important that you can do or access. Yeah, it's sometimes it's very confusing to know what to do, and then sometimes it's very obvious. So there's no way to kind of convey that via a stream without just kind of plucking through it. So, the default instrument tracks are as such. It's important just to go over them again. We have the first two, which have this brain-looking thing, because we'll get to why it looks like that. But 1 and 2, the second one looks like a nuclear explosion. Those are your drums. It's going to be basically essentially 2 sample kits that you can plug in your own samples or use their libraries or whatever. Then 3 is bass. 4 is a pluck, but not on my session. Let's put a pluck there. Okay. And so when I change this like sound, this engine, sometimes you'll see the screen change up here, but also anything that I've programmed so far on this 4th track, the pluck track. So I have a note here. It's now going to have the new sound, the new synth sound, not the one I had before. So you can hear that, which is that's a pretty nice sound. Track 5 is lead. So that is going to be a little bit more of a, I guess my project is very ethereal and not too much of a lead, but 6 is a soft pluck, 7 strings, and 8 a pad. So it is a lot to take in really quickly, but what I would recommend if you have one of these is just start making a pattern on one track, then another, then another, then another, then another, then another, and kind of fumble your way through it. So let's do that. So in order to do that, and the reason why I'm not just starting a fresh project is because I don't know what I'm doing with the I/O that's going to change and maybe hinder the stream. So what I'm going to do instead is, and this is kind of tedious, but it's worth showing. I don't know a better way to do this, but I'm going to go to a pattern. So I'm going to pattern 20. I'm not using this pattern for anything yet. You can see here that there's these 8 different like rectangles, and those show when you have MIDI notes in that track on that pattern. But you want to make sure you know when you're actually working with a new pattern on any given track to make something that's fresh and new and not referential to something that you previously did and maybe overwrite what you previously did. That'll make a little bit more sense moving forward. But for the sake of trying, let's add up these 8 tracks with the current engines that they're running. So we have, we're going to go through and we're going to do hit new on every single normal track. I don't think I can actually add any more track or any more types of sequences for my bass. I have a lot of bass parts in this project. So I'm just going to scroll down to the empty one, which I probably made a long time ago. So that's the other thing. You can scroll through them, the ones that you already have, but keep in mind that you might have a pattern that you might have used a blank spot intentionally before, and if you add to it now, so like if I had silence on track 4 in pattern, let's say 10 instead of 20, and then I add it on pattern 20, I'm gonna be adding it on 10 as well. I think it's kind of one of the more annoying things that I've run into so far. So getting that workflow down is worth, just mentioning. But it's okay. I have a new copy of the session. I can screw around with it. I'm just going to make sure that all of these are empty and we don't have any lights up here by making new, essentially like regions or loops for each of these 8 initial tracks. So now we should hear silence if I press play. But if we don't, I'll explain why. So, and I knew we wouldn't. All right, so I went through and I made fresh regions for every single normal track. And you can see as I go through, even though it's kind of hard, that these are all blank rectangles. The stuff you see when it splays above or below is the set of patterns that you have on that track. And so that's why there's 8 in a row. They reference these 8 tracks in the pattern that you're accessing or using at the time. It's very similar to kind of Ableton Live's the mode where you're not the normal Ableton Live mode, the one that where you're working with loops a lot more than actual like DAW logic with mixing and long fades and regions and stuff like that. So anyway, where was I? Track 20. So we're still hearing stuff, even though these are all empty. There's a reason for that, and that's because you have to remember that there are another 8 tracks, and these are the aux tracks, the red ones, the red lights. So that means that if I go into this screen, I might be very confused. Why don't I see anything going on here? Well, you have to press this button again, the pattern button or whatever it's called. We'll get to what it's called. So now you can see there's 2 different modes of this particular scene or sequence of the number 20. There's 2 different modes, and we have stuff on some of these tracks. So you can see they're lit up. So in order to get something that's truly empty and devoid of any sound when we press play, we're going to have to make a new set. I'm just going to go ahead and do it on all these tracks. So all 16 tracks now. These are all blank. So we shouldn't hear anything. And I mean, we probably won't. So that's important to show. Because that's part of the workflow that's very important to understand if you want to use this thing properly and quickly. The thing that's happening is on these aux tracks, there's a lot of modulation, essentially, of what you are doing with these initial 8 tracks. So let's say I finally add some tracks together and make some noise, right? So let's you can see these are red because I just recorded them. And so now we have an already quantized track for track 1. Now I'm in track 2. This is empty. Let's find some stuff I like. Already got a pretty decent beat going, but what could be happening already is on the aux side, if you were already kind of messing with it, you could have some punch-in effects or something going on, so it might sound different. So you have to know that left brain, right brain stuff is going on. That's kind of the whole workflow of this thing. So if we wanted to change this up, go to a different pattern I already did with this track, as well as this one, where I just have one little punch and blip there. But here's something else that's a little bit different. So that's doing the triplet thing. And you know, you're always able to get some type of visual feed when you're using punch-in effects like this. So the one of the aux tracks is punch-in effects. And if you're not familiar, it's just real-time changing of your pattern. It's really fun. I do it a lot on the OPZ, and I like messing with the punch-in effects. So we already sequenced a drum beat, which is what the guide's telling us to do. And it tells you kind of a pretty heavy-handed way of doing it. Excuse me. But I'll kind of breeze over this so that you can see it. So it starts introducing step components. So similar to punch-in effects, and not to be confused with punch-in effects, are step components, which, if you're wondering what all the icons down here, you know, it doesn't say F, G, A, B, C, D, E like you'd expect on a piano. There's a bunch of these different icons. Some of them are familiar, some of them aren't. It depends on how much teenage engineering stuff you've used before, but in this case, you know, I knew about half of them because of the OPZ already. But essentially, a step component is when you take one of these steps and you hold Shift and you hit it, or you just not hit it, but you click on it. And now you're kind of turning this step in the sequence into something different by adding a modulator down here. So in the case of, let's see, what's something that always works? Dividing. So this will multiply, it'll divide the two triggers. So it'll turn this into two triggers in one step length, I think. So let's hear the difference. So this is what this sequence sounds like. Actually, for good measure, I'm going to make sure it's all we hear. And also get rid of the punch-in effects. So now we're just hearing track 2. And now let's try to use a step component. So I'm clicking on this step. You know, let's do a few steps so we know what's going on. And I'm going to hit random, which, if you can't read it, it says 5 steps, 1 octave. So that's a random, it's going to do a random note within 5 steps in the same octave, I believe. And then we can assign more than one, and you can see how it stays lit up. And this says multiply, so we're dividing these into double triggers. So this is what it sounds like now, that pattern. And because there's random, it's going to be different every time for those steps that we changed. Now, something worth noting is that undoing things on teenage engineering stuff is always finicky. You have, you know, a limited number of things that you can undo from, and they encourage you to kind of just push forward on a lot of their gear. So let's see if we can undo what I did with step components by using the undo function, which is Shift and then record. Cannot undo is what it said. Once again, I apologize. I wish I could get the screen to look clearer, but it's very difficult with my hardware. So if we want to get back into the step components and get rid of them, all we have to do is hold down Shift. You can see slightly that this, and this all get dimmer, but the ones that have step components on them stay the same, letting you know that there's step components there. So if we click on them, they'll start blinking and they show us what we applied, and we can get rid of it. So now they're not there anymore. I might have changed this into a different sound, but it's still the same every time and doesn't have a step component on it. Let's try another step component on that beat. Let's do a bunch. And you can also change what the step component is, what it's doing. So there's like down, up, but you can change the interval or the amount here as well. So let's go down 3 steps, 1 ramp, 3 steps, 1 octave. Let's do 5 steps, 1 octave. Random. Let's do 2 steps, 1 octave, and then we'll do some multiplying. 5 triggers. We'll do ignore chord. No, let's not ignore the chord progression, but you can see just how much stuff there is. You can bend the shape, which does some envelope filtering and modulation. So now let's see how weird this one beat gets. Not that weird yet. It's kind of disappointing. I was expecting it to be a lot weirder. Let's get rid of some of them and see if that does help. Anything that helps. Not really. Hold, obviously, you can notice it pretty easily because what it does is it makes the sequence not 16 steps, so now it has a very odd interval. And now I just made it 7 extra beats. Let's go ahead and do a ramp up. Sorry, I just added a bunch of them. Now, some of them are actually to skip doing the action. So there's this kind of, there's just a fun way to kind of randomize everything if you want to with step components. They can be a pain in the butt sometimes, though. Okay. So, I kind of went through the step component stuff really quickly, but that's because I want to get on to some actual melody and get through the bass. So the bass is usually the 3rd track. So let's go ahead, and I'm not going to record the same way I typically would. As in, I'm not going to do like just a live performance, because you can do that pretty easily. 1 second. Doing like a live performance like this. I guess I'll leave that, but I'll show that you can also do this if you want to record. You can simply, hit a note, place it on that step. Oh, shoot. I'm not showing. So I set down this bass line. So I am now going to show a different way, other than live recording, which is like that. Let's go ahead and turn this one down too. You can hit a note and then place it. So I'll place this sort of in a 4 on the floor pattern. So and I don't like the note there, so I'm going to change it to a D instead of a C. Another way that you can step sequence is when you hold record and just press different buttons, it'll add it in the sequence. I believe you can skip. Yeah, you can skip by pressing plus and minus. So you can go back and forth. So now it's got another track. We now have 5 tracks that will play. Now, something else you might have noticed is that I keep saying 16 steps, but sometimes it takes a long time for the cursor to get from the beginning to the end, a lot more than 16. That's because if you go into this bar button that's way on this side, you can set how many bars of 16 you're doing, and this one has 4, whereas this track has 2, so it gets from left to right quicker. And you can change that after the fact, so let's go ahead and change this to 1 bar. So I already like that a little bit better, so I'll leave it. There's also some other functions here that are cool. I don't want to get into it too much yet, but it's how you quantize, how you add swing, how you kind of shape. It basically makes it a lot easier for you to basically deal with how something sits within the mix relative to other things, as well as how many bars you want that element to be. So in the original version of the song I had, let's see if it's still set. Nope. The bass would be 4 bars long. So if I wanted to do that, I could set it back. But it's going to sound different now. It's not going to be the same because it's going to spread out the notes across 32 beats instead of 16. So and it's the bass that's taking longer to get through. And since that kind of loses the bass entirely, we're going to go back to 2 instead of 4. And let's go ahead and make the bass sound cooler and make it move as we're going through the sequence. So we can do that by using the encoders, which I haven't used nearly as much as I thought I would so far, but these are very important. So if we press play, there's various effects. You know, there's like a chorus effect sort of here, then there's like a couple filters. And something we can do that's cool is record anything that we alter. And that stays there, and it's like printed into the steps. There's some quirks to it. You are really familiar with those quirks if you've used an OPZ before, so just saying. But from this, we can already do some other stuff like, what I wanted to say was we can, if we didn't like what we added, with the encoders there to the base. We can clear what we did. So those didn't move. These 4 objects didn't move to reflect the things I did on the encoders, because I stripped them. And you can also quickly strip all the notes as well on this screen, the bar screen. Okay, so I know that's difficult to see. I wish I could do something about it, but it is quite difficult to get this thing to show up in a resolution that I like, and then also still have all the gradients. The screen itself is very dim, just to get it on camera right now, next to anything else. I've tried different lighting. I've tried a lot to make this work, so I apologize that it's not perfect, though. So the guide has a lot of stuff here that I just kind of already went over, which is the bar system, how long you make your set patterns, how you can record things in different modes, whether you're holding the record button and hitting notes or you're playing along live. All this stuff is pretty congruent with the OPZ and the KO2 and probably the OP1. There's some very similar transport functions across those different devices, so you will probably get the hang of it if you're familiar with any of the other gear that Teenage Engineering releases. So now we have some more tracks on this far end that I'm going to go through and just add some stuff to pretty quickly. It's like pads and strings, and you can add basically a pretty complex arrangement if you get enough timbers that are different. So let's go ahead and add some more stuff. That doesn't sound like that, or at least not as loud as that. And you can mute something in the mix window by holding shift and pressing that, and you can see that the light is no longer on, indicating that you've kind of muted the whole side of the instruments. So all that would play in this scenario is, if it could, whatever's on an aux track, which I don't think it triggers the instrument tracks if they're muted, but let's skip. So, track 6. Don't like the sound. Let's go with whatever this is. You can see it's some type of wavetable type synth or organ sound. Still a little loud, so let's go ahead, turn it down. And then we're gonna go ahead and how should I do this? Oh yeah. Gonna filter it a little bit. So in region 7 we have, or track 7 we have whatever this is. And this is a good time to show one of the final buttons I haven't gone over. I'll go over these buttons and the other couple tracks, and then I'll be at a good stopping point, because the aux side is a whole nother beast, and I just wanted to get through the initial tracks first. And I might do the aux in a different separate video, but the main thing I wanted to show was just more of the actual beat making part, and if I can get to that I will. But something that's really cool that's worth showing on this device is that you can kind of, similar to how there's the drum track in Logic, you know, like the drummer track, you can kind of do something like a maestro mode, which actually kind of it turns what you do with these steps and makes it much more performative than you did. So let's make this simple instrument really interesting and complex by recording. Okay, so that was very bad, so I'll do it again. And I don't want this long of bars. Let's do shorter bars. Right. Okay. And I'll explain why you're still hearing that in just a second. So I didn't like the last note, and something that's worth showing is you can go out of record node, and let's say I wanted to add another F at the end of the sequence while it's playing. I can hit F, and so now I just made an F note that sustains those 4 beats by holding down and pulling, dragging basically over as far as I can. And if you get rid of a note, it's still technically it's saved, and you can just add it right back with all the qualities that it had. So it's still 4 beats long. Even though I deleted it, I can put it back. And if I didn't like it, let's go and do a D instead of an F. Cool. So, how do we make this interesting? Well, we go into Maestro mode. Now we have Maestro, or it's one of these 3. So we have here Arpeggiator, Hold, or Maestro. Arpeggiator sounds like what it sounds like, which is this. So we have these settings, not to get too far into it, but it's a triplet and a ramp up, and then that's how many octaves, and then this is I believe if the punch-in effects modulate it. And now let's modulate that. So, when you have Maestro mode on, if you press stop, it still plays the Maestro part, or the setting. And that's what I mean by syncopating with the KO2. So if I were to go like, here. It's still playing. That's something you have to get used to too. Maybe there's a setting to turn it off, but I don't know. Also, it helps you kind of stay syncopated correctly when you're syncing the gear this way. So I wanted to show the other Maestro modes really quick too. So Hold is cool when you know that you just kind of want to make pads or like really big chords. So go in, select it, and now it's not going to do all the arpeggiation. So in some of these modes, if you hold down the track, it'll solo it for you as well. let's try the third mode, Maestro. So this has a different set of things that we can do. I don't remember all the names, but they're quite wild if you want to get into it. And specifically with Maestro, what you can do is you can essentially add extra notes to your arpeggiation, so you're kind of playing an arpeggiation. Let me see if I can get it to work the way I want it to. Gotta hold down Shift. That wasn't good. So let's see what it's doing here. So that sounds wild and weird. Let's see if I can just reset it. And if I can't, I'll try something different with it. But that reset it in theory. So down on the bottom in Maestro mode, there's usually some type of bank of notes that you're allowed to kind of hinge to what's happening in the pattern. I think that's the Maestro part. It tries to turn you into a more elaborate performance just by kind of banking what you're doing in real time and let you have more control of arpeggiation in a certain way, or just the steps behavior in a performative sense. And, you know, there's definitely a lot of stuff like worth going in depth with or trying to figure out with Maestro mode and arpeggio mode. There's even there's going to be alternate functions if you hold down Shift for the arpeggiator mode as well, like legato and things like that. But for the sake of demonstration, just really quick, the banked notes here sound like this in this context. So if I go in and I change that by holding down Shift, I selected a few new ones. Let's see what it sounds like. So it really, it kind of tags all those notes into your steps that you're doing. I'm assuming there's probably a better way to do it than what I just did. And I have used it a little bit more successfully in the past, but you can turn it off just by pressing the button again. And one of the better parts of it is when you let it access the punch-in effects, because once again, that's kind of crossing into the other aux side of things. There's a left and right brain to this thing, and it wants you to access both of them or have that the crosstalk happen, a lot of cross-pollination between your aux tracks and your instrument tracks. But we'll save aux tracks for another day. Let's add a pad on the end here. So this last track is usually pad, and it takes a while to hear the note, likely because the envelope filter is set up to have a very long attack. So if we press 2, we can see, yes, that's the case. So let's see what it sounds like right out the gate. Not much different as far as the initial attack. And there is, once again, on many of these tracks, there's a filter and then the amp envelope, which you find that in a lot of hardware synths or just general on modular synths. There's going to be 2 different styles of filter, an amp filter and then the more traditional envelope filter. So let's try doing something more dramatic. It's still very quiet. Let's see if we can turn it up. There we go. It's very lush, so let's add some, just 2 notes maybe, an F and a C. Very pretty. Bring the volume down a little bit. And this is what it's, the engine is using this waveform of the sound to create the pad. So now if we do a little bit of playback, I'm going to clock it with the KO2 and see what it all sounds like together. That's weird. That turned back on. I hope somebody else saw that. these notes on 7 where I had the maestro basically ruining the maestro mode. They turned back on when I did the KO2. Oh, I know why. But it has to do with the specific way I'm sequencing. Not to get into it too much, but if I do a clocked sequence start on the KO2 and the XY at the same time, usually what happens is it'll mess with my pattern, and sometimes default if I'm in the song mode to like the beginning of a different pattern that I set up in this mode, where you have the access to like every single pattern you've made in the combinations you've used them. I think if I have a different pattern where I have maestro mode on, it's going to turn it back on if I do this specific type of clocking, because any type of pattern that you make, the settings as far as like what you do with the encoders, what you do with the bar settings here, like how you've quantized it, all those extra details are saved to that instance. So this specific square. So if I don't have maestro on this one, it won't be on this channel, in theory, I'm pretty sure. But let's go back, make sure it's off, and see, yeah, it just went to pattern 1 instead of 20, and that's because the KO2 was trying to tell it to do that. You can stop that from happening by manually selecting a pattern when you go into this pattern select mode. So it shouldn't go to 1. Here's hoping. Cool. I feel like that's a little loud. So this is just the XY. And this is just the KO2. At least this pattern. And then this is them together. Now, let's say I want to jazz this up with punch-in effects. I can do that. Punch-in effects are, some of them are the same. There's punch-in effects that, there's punch-in effects 1 and 2. 1 is on the OPZ. I don't know what kind is on the KO2. And then version 2 I know is definitely on the XY. But I can do punch-in effects on either unit. I do want to try adding and or messing with clocking different ways between this, the OPZ, and the KO2, and see if punching in clocks between devices. I still don't know all the syncing and MIDI functionality with the XY yet, but I can independently do some punching in on either device. So you were hearing it there, and then you can also do it here. Holding shift and hitting keys will usually do some type of punch-in effect, and then you can also go directly into the brain. Weird. Oh, that's weird. Pads sound good. Most of the synth engines sound pretty good on the XY. Now, just to go back and show something that's a little bit more put together, let me go ahead and load the previous state. So here's some similar but different stuff. Oh, perfect timing. At least we get a kill screen. This is what it looks like when your OPXY dies. So it gives you some type of output on what happened that I can't tell. It's also very small text. And it's a good sign that I should probably stop for now. But I plan on doing and to show how quickly and easily you can kind of get things back up and running, I might as well do that. So if I turn things back on, you're not going to hear the KO2. That's one quirk to projects. That it won't save that track's status, so you have to turn it back on. And it's track 5 on the aux side. So now we can hear it again, and we can get pretty quickly back to So like, back up and running. So that's the initial intro to the XY. Let's see how far we got. So we got to 4.4, adding in punch-in effects, which is what I've been doing a lot of recently. So you can see, or I demonstrated that a little bit, but to give you an idea of how much stuff there is to this thing, we're here. And we're at 4.4, and then I kind of did a lot of this stuff already. I did step components, I did track buttons. I didn't link tracks yet, but I got a lot of this stuff for the most part. But I feel like something that is worth noting, I finished this guide recently, which is why I'm doing this walkthrough with it, but I did, and I don't know if they changed it, but there's a lot of, there's a handful of typos in the latter half. When it comes to, I can't remember where it starts getting off, but I think around synth engine, somewhere around here, it starts using telling you the wrong module buttons to press in the wrong places. So I didn't want to go through the guide if I knew it would not be totally correct, but it looks like they're fixing it or in the process of adding more, because I don't think all this stuff was here last time I looked, which is a couple days ago. I could be wrong, but let's see what they have under workflow. This explains kind of what that scene, what this looks like, what this means. So I did cover a lot of this stuff without actually getting into the what it says in the guide. So when I go through the rest, you know, I'll have to go through the auxiliary stuff and kind of explain what you can do there. There's a lot of cool things there, and this will be a little bit of a review when I go through this part, but I'll try to get to it part 2 is what I'm trying to say, because the XY has so much stuff, it warrants it. And after however long I've been streaming, you know, I've only gotten to 4 to 5 out of, you know, 25. A lot of the stuff at the end is very dry and not very interesting anyway. It's just, you know, maintenance and things like that. But the more you know about these devices, the more powerful they are. And like, for example, you know, knowing that it is MTP is pretty amazing, just to transfer large files quickly. And at some point I need to, maybe what I'll do is I'll test the Bluetooth out and just syncing it with other devices if I can in a following stream. And I also will try to go through the KO2 as well this week. So hopefully I can get through that this week, because I've been wanting to add some more just content in this format where I just kind of walk through these devices and what they're capable of, whether it's with a guide or not, I don't know. But the way that a lot of these things work together with the rest of my gear is just, you know, it's ripe for the picking. So I might as well start trying to do that a little bit on stream with the XY if I have time. Thank you for watching. I am on all the normal social medias, either at Maxedonia or at maxdeadroom. You can follow me on Instagram at maxedonia. I also do have a GitHub where I leave stuff like my mandala projects and things like that. So check it out if you're interested. You can find me online, and I will answer questions if you got them, because this is what I do. I'm an audio engineer, so ask me questions and I will try to answer. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good week.